What's up, deckheads? March is upon us, and with it comes another humble monthly choice. But is this bundle worth your cash, or just plain trash? In this video, I play all the games on my big black shiny deck. That's right, I tested out all these games on my new OLED deck to tell you just how well it handles each of the games in the bundle. And of course, somewhere in this video, we have the winner of last month's Steam key giveaway to announce. Want a key as well? Just let me know in the comments. I'll select a winner at random to announce in next month's video. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Pacific Drive throws you into a post-apocalyptic road trip where your only companion is your rust bucket of a car. The gameplay loop revolves around scavenging expeditions, upgrading your ride, and trying to survive in a world that seems hellbent on making sure you don't. It's not exactly a horror game, but the eerie atmosphere and constant sense of unease do a solid job of keeping you on edge. If you've ever wanted to feel like you're starring in a road trip movie directed by the apocalypse itself, this is it. The Steam Deck handles the game surprisingly well, but you'll need to set everything to low graphics settings to maintain a somewhat steady 30 frames per second. Even then, expect occasional stutters, but nothing that completely ruins the experience. Battery life clocks in at around 2 hours and 20 minutes on the OLED, which is decent considering how much the game throws at the deck. The default controller layout works great, so you can focus on the real challenge, keeping your barely functioning car in one piece while navigating a world that actively hates you. If you're into survival games with a strong sense of atmosphere and enjoy tinkering with a vehicle that feels like it's always one pothole away from falling apart, Pacific Drive is worth checking out. Just be prepared for some rough roads ahead, both in the game and in the frame rate. Homeworld 3 brings back the epic space battles and tactical depth the series is known for, but it does so at a pace that makes a chess match look like an action movie. Even in combat, the game moves at a snail's pace, making it feel less like an intergalactic war and more like watching a screensaver with occasional explosions. Surprisingly, the game controls well on the Steam Deck with a default trackpad layout, letting you command your fleet without too much hassle. Performance is decent, hovering around 65 frames per second, but if you're using the default Proton version, brace yourself for a soft lock at the end of the first mission. Switching to the latest Proton GE version solves the issue, but it's still frustrating that this is necessary just to progress. Battery life sits at around 2 hours and 40 minutes on the OLED, which is reasonable for a large-scale strategy game. If you're a sci-fi RTS fan, you'll probably enjoy the tactical gameplay, just don't expect much excitement. It's a game where you either appreciate the slow burn or find yourself nodding off between battles. If you love watching me put my deck through its paces, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Your support gives me the confidence to whip out my deck in public without shame. Now, let's get back to the games. Wild Hearts is yet another EA app key because apparently Humble Thought's last month's suffering just wasn't enough. Yes, you can get it working on the Steam Deck, but it's a hassle, and you'll need an internet connection just to launch the game. And just when you think you're in, EA hits you with another gut punch. The app doesn't recognize the deck's virtual keyboard, so when I reached the character creation screen after the tutorial, I was completely locked out. At that point, I considered connecting a Bluetooth keyboard, but that kind of defeats the whole point of playing on the deck, doesn't it? Even if you do manage to get past all the login and technical nonsense, you're still stuck with a game that crawls at around 16 frames per second. That's right, 1/6, on the lowest graphics settings. It controls well, sure, but that doesn't really matter when it feels like you're playing inside a PowerPoint presentation. To top it off, some of the videos just show up as the SMPTE color bars because nothing says immersive hunting adventure like a screen full of test patterns. Hooking up your giblets to a battery and giving praise to your maker, taking your friends up on a bet and going to third base with a blender, and playing Wild Hearts on the Steam Deck. If that's how you get your jollies, then you do you. I, however, will not. Thank goodness we got that EA app key business out of the way because, oh wait, here's another one. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if next month's bundle came with a mandatory Origin revival. If you're still willing to jump through all the hoops, Tales of Kenzera Zhao does run flawlessly on the deck, locked at 60 frames per second with a solid 4-hour battery life. The story and setting are unique, drawing inspiration from Bantu mythology, which helps it stand out visually and thematically. Unfortunately, once you get past that, the gameplay is just another Metroidvania, and a fairly generic one at that. It plays fine, the controls feel smooth, but in a genre that's already overflowing with standout titles, it doesn't do much to leave a lasting impression. If you're a die-hard Metroidvania fan and don't mind the EA nonsense, you might get some enjoyment out of it. Otherwise, you're probably better off playing with one of the hundreds of other great games in the genre that don't require a third-party launcher. It's time to announce the winner of last month's Steam Key giveaway. Congratulations to the Red Dragon Hunter 3526. You've got that Gotham Knights key you wanted. Make sure to send a message to the Reddit user Degus to claim your key. And for the other users, don't worry if you missed out. Make sure to drop a comment to enter for next month's Steam Key giveaway. Extra emphasis on the Steam. None of that EA app nonsense here.
Finally.
Gravity Circuit wears its Mega Man inspiration like a badge of honor, and honestly, it earns it. The first level alone feels like stepping straight into Mega Man X, but instead of being a lazy clone, it manages to take the foundation and build something both familiar and fresh. It even introduces new gameplay mechanics the right way, by letting you figure them out in a controlled scenario instead of holding your hand like a tutorial-obsessed babysitter. The retro pixel art and soundtrack are spot on, capturing that classic 16-bit magic without feeling outdated. Movement and combat are tight and responsive, making every jump, punch and grapple feel precise. It runs at a locked 60 frames per second, and with a whopping 6 hours and 30 minutes of battery life on the OLED, you can blast through the entire 6-hour campaign in one go without reaching for the charger. If you're a fan of retro action platformers, Gravity Circuit is an easy recommendation. It's fast, fluid, and scratches that Mega Man itch without feeling like a cheap knockoff. Honestly, this is probably the best game in the bundle. So Whoopass Immortal Death is a medieval fantasy action-adventure that doesn't take itself seriously for a second, and neither should you. It's packed with tongue-in-cheek humor, silly quests, and the kind of juvenile jokes that might make some roll their eyes, but personally, I'm all for it. Sometimes you just need a game that lets you swing a sword and laugh at dumb jokes without overthinking it. There's a full leveling system, an open world stuffed with collectibles, and plenty of ridiculous encounters. It controls well on the Steam Deck, runs at a locked 90 frames per second, and offers about 3 hours and 50 minutes of battery life. Plenty of time to carve your way through absurd quests and questionable punchlines. Despite coming from a small team, the game is surprisingly impressive. It just goes to show that when it comes to your deck, size isn't everything. If you're in the mood for an action game that doesn't take itself too seriously, so Whoopass might be just what you're looking for. Racine might just be the single most boring game I've ever played in a Humble Choice bundle. It tries to blend idle game mechanics with deck building, proving that just like Hulk Hogan and rap, not all mashups are a good idea. You play cards to gradually build up your character, and if you time it just before an enemy attacks, you can mitigate some damage. That's about as exciting as it gets. The game controls fine on the Steam Deck with a default layout, and boasts an impressive 4 hours and 30 minutes of battery life. But honestly, if you've been playing this long, you should probably take a step back and ask yourself, why? Racine isn't broken, it's just mind-numbingly dull, like watching paint dry but with stats. Actually, that sounds better than Racine. Cavern of Dreams wants to capture the magic of Croc and Banjo-Kazooie, but it feels more like the knockoff version you'd find in a bargain bin. It's a standard collectathon with different sections of an open world to explore, but there's nothing here that really makes it stand out. The visuals are straight out of the late 90s, which might sound nostalgic, but on the OLED screen, they just look rough. It probably looks better on the LCD model, but even then, it's hard to ignore how outdated everything feels. At least the controls work well with the default layout, so mechanically it's functional. But when a game leans so heavily on nostalgia without bringing anything new to the table, it needs more than just decent controls to stay interesting. With a 6-hour runtime and 4 hours and 30 minutes of battery life on the deck, you've got plenty of time to collect everything, if you don't get bored first. Alright, we've gone through all the games, but now it's time for the big question. Is this bundle worth your cash, or just plain trash? But before we get into that, if you've enjoyed watching me play with my deck this whole time, go ahead and click that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell. Now, let's wrap this up. If you thought last month's bundle was rough, buckle up, this one's a full-blown train wreck. Not only did Humble ignore the backlash over the EA app key, but they doubled down and gave us two. It's like they saw the outrage and thought, you know what would really spice things up? More suffering. PC players already hate using the EA app, but on the Steam Deck, it's an even bigger nightmare. And while a couple of games are mildly entertaining, the rest are straight up garbage. This was an easy call. Skip this bundle and spend your money on something that won't make you question your life choices. That's the end of the video. Now if you'll all excuse me, I'm going back to my first ever run through of Persona 5, all on my shiny OLED Steam Deck. See you next time, Deckheads.
Sir Whoopass was his name. His power even tax collector.